Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and Strikeforce, issue number 1. This was a pretty decent book, but it had way too many problems in it for me to actually like it. Still, I'm going to tell you 5 things about this book, and you're going to judge for yourself after I tell you about who made this book. So, we got Teeny Howard on writing, German Peralta on art, Jordi Belair on colors, VC's Josepino on letters and design, and logo, Jay Bowen. Cover artists are Andrea Sorrentino and Dean White, and a whole bunch of people doing the variant covers. So, number 1 on this list, that opening. Oh, it had me. This comic book had me right away, like hook, line, and sinker. Just the first page alone, I'm like, wow, we got a great murder mystery thing on our hand. No, we've got a spy thriller. This is incredible. I'm so into this. A couple pages later, I'm still good, but it slowly declines, and every page thereafter just pulls me right out of the book. Let's talk about number 2 on this story, Blade. The whole reason for Blade being here was really weak. The only reason why he's here is because he's an Avenger, and he had a single isolated incident with one particular monster type, like one individual that causes him to believe that no, all of these people are actually innocent, and they're somehow not contagious with the bloodborne pathogen that was expressed in the beginning, which might be airborne. We don't actually know. So I'm going to break them out of this secure facility, and I don't understand the purpose of this comic book. I don't understand. Even the idea of having Blade, it looked like a flashback to me, and it wasn't until this explanation was given that I realized that this was just a couple days ago, this flashback sequence, as opposed to 50 years ago, because Blade is drawn in one of his old butterfly collar suits. And these are huge butterfly collars. I'm talking like inside and out. They're huge. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, dude, this has to be back in the day with Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan doing this, because like why is he wearing this? So none of it made sense to me. Let's talk about number 3 in this story, the Verdai. Brand new, basically, character class in here, a brand new monster, okay? I'm a Dungeons & Dragons player, and I can tell you that the difference between a changeling and a shapeshifter is, it may not seem like a lot, but let's look at it this way. Imagine somebody like Mystique, who grew up knowing that she can change her shape all the time. Imagine also someone like the Chameleon, who can, it's not magical, it's not mutant in nature, it's not even, some kind of a power that he has. He has the ability through his skills to change his appearance all the time, right? There are lots of different characters like this who can change their shape. Lots of them. And the idea that they can do this is, okay, infiltration, blah, 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 but you're only dealing with a character. But if you're dealing with an entire society that has the ability, think like the Skrulls, who their defining trait is they don't have any singular shape. They don't have to agree to any particular shape here, there, or whatever. All right? This is something that wasn't explored back in the Kirby and Stan Lee days because, well, whatever. It wasn't even explored in Dungeons and Dragons until only, a decade ago? So I get it. And I love the idea of this. Imagine if you didn't have to take any one shape. Your whole identity is not based in one form alone. You can't say, this is who I am. There is no like white identity or even a tall identity. There is nothing like that. There is no identifying characteristic aside from the idea that you can take any identifying characteristic that you want. Think about it. There's very little to make fun of people about in that case. Changeling society is impressive, and that's the difference between a changeling and a standard shapeshifter. All right, one is a culture, one is a society, one is an identity. The other one is just, oh, I have the ability to change my shape. That's great. Was that explained in here? Not even remotely. Unfortunately, they actually have the most, and I hate this terminology, but they have the most SJW character possible, and I love Wiccan. But this is what those comic-gator types always say, and they literally have all the fuel in the world to make this argument now. One of the most SJW type characters explaining it in the most SJW type standard. Oh, well, they're not really shapeshifters. I'd consider this more of a changeling myself. I'm dating a shapeshifter or, a changeling and blah, blah, blah. Dude, there was a better way to do this, and that's going to come up later in this review. Let's talk about number 4 on this list. Way too much coincidence. Every single thing about this comic book is held together by very shaky grounds. In fact, all the individual plots here are solid and they're great, and I genuinely love them. I'm invested in them. But the thread holding them all together, we're already in the Dungeons and Dragons world, the motif, right? With the Changeling thing. So let's take it a step further. Let's look at plate mail armor. You got a solid shoulder piece, a solid chest piece, a solid, the whole corset, all these different pieces that are just, dude, you're not penetrating them with one or two blows of your sword. You gotta work on getting this armor apart. But what if, instead of being held together by solid metal rings, that are twisted together, or at least a good rope, instead they're just held together by string? That's what I feel like with the plot threads here. Solid plots, weak threads. All right? Just look at it scientifically. There's solid state, there's liquid state, and there's gaseous state. This is a gaseous plot thread holding everything together. It's weak. In fact, it's kind of like a soup sandwich. All right? Former military. This is a military saying. Imagine a piece of bread, a ladle of soup, and then another piece of bread on top of that. Can you eat this as a sandwich? No, don't call it a sandwich, because it's not. This is a hot mess. Literally, the definition of a hot mess. You could sip it from its bowl. You could eat it with a spoon. But if you don't have a spoon and you don't have a plate or a bowl, and it's just a piece of bread on a table, pour a ladle of soup on it, and a sandwich, you've got a hot mess. You can't call it a sandwich. What do you do with this? How do you eat this? Like you're licking it up or something like that. That's what this is. This comic book is a soup sandwich. Let's talk about number 5 on this list. At the very end, Tini Howard goes and gives us this. It's actually a really good letter. I like this letter, because it explains a lot. Here's the problem. It explains it in all the wrong ways. She is trying to convince us that this is a horror story. I'm sorry, of all things in the world, really? A horror story? Because when I'm reading this, I'm thinking, oh, this is about, a bloodborne pathogen, or, and maybe it's going to evolve into an airborne pathogen, but there are definitely people who are trying to protect themselves from contagion with their little panther gas masks, whatever. Black Panther's wearing it cool. Everybody else is wearing it. Y'all just look silly. But these guys are now wearing... Everything's got to be freaking panther shaped, right? That's all that Black Panther is. Anyway, so... it turns into, from that, and I'm thinking this is going to turn into the Contagion story that I think in December we're going to get that, right? With Moon Knight and all these other characters. Cool, right? Well, maybe not. And then it turns into, oh no, it's a mystical story, and oh no, now it's a murder mystery story, and there's spy theft and invasion story. There's all these different stories. The thing that I never got out of this was horror. I never got horror out of this. It's not about being brave and not scared of anything. No, this didn't feel like a horror story. In fact, of all the things, it didn't feel like a horror story. There's a part in here where after Blade basically kills somebody, his sister calls up immediately afterwards on the cell phone, because they're trying to infiltrate a place. Angela's the only person not infiltrating anybody. But with his volume turned way up, with a song playing, cool song, I'm your boogeyman, that's what I am, Rob Zombie, baby. Go and check out that Joe Rogan interview that he just did recently. But for this cat to have his radio up in the first place, his phone way up in the first place, it just didn't make sense. But then he immediately gets a call after he does this deed from this person related to this person he just, killed, and says, hey, so-and-so just showed up, he's acting weird, and you're the only person I can think to call. Really? Really? Like, that's the thread that's holding this together. My God, man, this book is held together by a plot thread of gravy. I just don't understand it. So there are great concepts in this story. Don't get me wrong. The problem is it's just not held together right. And as a former publisher, the same thing I tell anybody who tries to get into writing. If you don't know what genre you're writing for, your book will never, ever succeed. Teenie Howard thinks that this is a horror story. But if I'm watching a movie that's got Adam Sandler and Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle and all these, you know, comedians in it, Jerry Seinfeld for crying out loud. If I've got all these comedians in a story, don't call it a murder mystery, especially if nobody gets killed. You have to know what the genre is that you're selling. And the worst thing about this book is at the end, it's actually a beautiful letter, but it's all wrong. Trying to convince us that this is a horror story of all things. Epic fail. Especially when that space could have been used to explain what a changeling actually is and how it differentiates itself from a shapeshifter. A lot of really big missed opportunities in this. This comic book could have been a whole lot better, and it's really only exemplified in this. This is a beautiful work of art, but you literally just turned Bucky to Bucky. Kind of Bucky to Winter Soldier. Didn't even have like the masked Winter Soldier in the middle, which kind of separates these two. It's just Bucky to Bucky. It's beautiful, but what was the point? This whole comic book, man, it could have been something amazing, but at the end of the day, for me, it's just an amazing disappointment. I'm still looking forward to see what happens here, because at the end of the day, I feel like in my role-playing games, I can use some of these ideas. I can recycle them, and I'll probably put them together in a much better thread of continuity. We'll see. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.